Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. This week, I want to talk about The Boys Season 2, Episode 2. I know I kind of left the ending of the X-Files ruins in the dust, but we've covered the most important components of that book, and I'll finish it somewhere along the way in binge-watching all of Season 2 of The Boys. Episode 2 is also chock full of information, so we are going to talk today about Billy finding out about Rebecca still being alive, themes of Join Me on the Dark Side, and the difference between nice versus good, as well as gods and monsters. There is a lot going on in this episode, you guys. I feel like I understated that from Episode 1. There is a lot in that one, and there is a lot in this one. It doesn't feel overwhelming. They do a really great job with the pacing. It's not Game of Thrones final season. It is really great. So far, I've really enjoyed this encore for Season 1. And to briefly recap Episode 1, where we left off is that Homelander is micromanaging Vought. Even the marketing, he has Ashley firmly under his thumb and is overriding all of her focus groups for things like naming and branding supervillains versus super terrorists. They're doing these focus groups where they have members of the public come in and tell them how they feel about the different terms, whether they're inspiring awe and terror, or if they're feeling like they're falling flat. What scares them more, the word super terrorist or the word super villain? Even down to the naming schemes, Homelander is super micromanaging them. Vought, however, is not a fan of it, or at least Mr. Edgar isn't, and he does not even blink when he stares down Homelander, somehow managing to make him feel small and insignificant, which is the antithesis of who Homelander likes to think he is, which is a superior, godlike being. On the other side, we also see that the Deep gets bailed out of jail by another Soup who goes by Eagle the Archer, their Hawkeye-type character, and they do a really great job with this character, pointing out the things that make him feel like he's not good enough to be a part of the Seven in any way because of his powers. And it's kind of like Hawkeye is sitting down with Aquaman from Justice League and going, hey man, this sucks. We are not the top tier superheroes that we want to be, but now we're going to learn how to love ourselves. And this is all facilitated by some lady named Carol, who says that therapy is destructive, but she can help the Deep get back in the Seven, and she wants him to call her teacher. She says that she's not a therapist, she is a teacher. So that guy bails the Deep out of jail. Eagle bails the Deep out of jail and goes, hey, even superheroes need a helping hand sometime. And he ends up waking up at Eagle's place to a drinking intervention with Eagle and Carol, and that's when she promises him that he can get back in the Seven with her help. It's the one thing he really wants right now, so it looks like even though it's an intervention and he's not jazzed about that, he's going to at least try. We also have the new girl, Stormfront, who has some chaotic bi energy, and I love it. She also has some BDE, and I don't know if she is a hero or a villain yet, but as a character, I'm very much enjoying her. Now that we're all caught up with the end of that, oh, and Billy has obviously been framed for the murder of Madeline Stillwell by Homelander. And let's be honest, Homelander lasered her to death like 2 minutes before Billy pulled that trigger. So I imagine that peri-mortem trauma would have been relatively indistinguishable from what Homelander did at that time. So really, even though Billy's getting framed for this, he did blow up the bomb, even though Madeline was already dead when he did it. I'm not so sure he wasn't going to do it anyway if she wasn't killed. Billy's a guy who definitely believes in collateral damage, so I can't tell you that part. But, Billy didn't technically kill her, but it happened so close to her death, and she was wearing the bomb when he set it off, so it's not like it's looking good for Billy. Although he technically didn't kill her. But this episode opens with Billy looking at the piece of paper he had scribbled on after Homelander had shown him that Becca was still alive, and then dumped him in the middle of Fort Wayne, I want to say Indiana, at a small restaurant called a Tony Cicero's. So he was dropped there and immediately starts writing everything down that he can remember so he can find Becca. He knows approximately what time that he was at that place, but he does not know anything else. All he knows is what time he was at Madeline's when Homelander got there, and he knows at what time he woke up in the Tony Cicero's parking lot. Because he'd been effectively knocked out twice by Homelander. I took a look at what he wrote. I paused it for a minute, and it says Yellow Ranch, sun 60 degrees Celsius, 9 to 1. I take it that he means 9 to 1 as the time that he was dropped off. So, it was sometime after 9 and sometime before 1. Then it also says that it's northwest, there was a breeze, large pines, juniper, no sidewalk, St. Augustine grass. So, I don't know about you guys and how much you know about lawn care. I don't know that much about lawn care, so I googled St. Augustine grass. I wanted to see why that might be significant. So it says that St. Augustine grass is a warm season long grass, and it's popular in tropical and subtropical regions. It's also medium to high maintenance grass, so it has a thick carpet-like sod or base, and that means that it tends to crowd out most other weeds and other grasses. So it takes a lot of effort. Someone is maintaining this. Somebody is paying for this. It tells Billy that she is very likely in a tropical or a subtropical region, and that combined with the temperature and the juniper and large pines can kind of help him narrow down where she is. Where might she be that St. Augustine grass as well as juniper and large pines could intersect? What does the style of the house tell him? So on and so forth. It looks like there's also a little short line or two written on the back of the paper, but I couldn't make out what it was. It didn't look like just a relief of, the light filtering through the paper from the other side. It was very red, and it looked a lot different from the others. And you can see at the bottom of the paper that it looks like he wrote something else, and then we lost it on the fold. But that appears to be a different part of the paper. So I'm not entirely sure what else he may have, but maybe we'll get to see it as we go along and get some more clues. In this flashback, we also see Billy realizing he's been framed for Madeline's death. Now, this probably happened in real time, probably 12 hours beforehand, maybe. He knows that he was knocked out for a certain period of time. Twice. And that's all we know, really. We don't even know how much time Billy spent there. But hopefully we'll find out as the story progresses. But now he knows, I've been framed for Madeline's death. And then the flashback ends. Billy pieces out of there. And we already know that he eventually does find the boys. And speaking of the boys, Kimiko keeps writing the word boy. She's practicing writing her English words in a kid's handwriting workbook and just keeps writing boy over and over again. But Frenchie still doesn't understand. And so she tries writing girl and then circling one of the words. And he's still not understanding it. And he looks like really sad about it because he just wants to understand her. On the other hand, Butcher is just also leaving again. He's like, hey, I'm going to go meet a contact. You're going to love it. And Huey stands up to him. He balks and he's just like, I'm not going to love it. I never love these things that you do. And it's a big moment for Huey. His character arc for season 1 was in learning to stand up to different people, whether that be A-Train and Vought, or, letting his dad know that he didn't want something or that he deserved a raise, things like that. And now Huey is standing up to Billy, who is arguably the scariest one of them all. I don't know if Billy or Homelander are more scary, in my opinion. Could go either way. There's also a really uncomfortable thread throughout this whole episode in which Homelander is trying to play catch with his son, and his son's not even very well coordinated to play basic catch in the yard. And the kid wants to make his dad happy, but he seems very uncomfortable as well. Homelander is telling him he wants him to use his powers. He wants Ryan, the little boy, to use his powers. He's setting these huge expectations that Ryan really looks like he feels are impossible to meet, and he feels powerless to do so, but also he's very confused. He's still sussing out how he feels about all of this. He's normally very isolated. It seems that Becca homeschools him and just takes him to his piano practices and things like that, but he's not spending a lot of time with other kids, and he says as much when he's talking to Homelander in one of the scenes where they're saying goodnight. But Homelander is really placing these huge expectations on this kid, and he's mad at Rebecca for not teaching him that he could do all these things and for isolating him. And he tells her, do you think that he's going to appreciate you for this, or do you think that when he realizes that you kept his powers from him, that he's going to resent you? And that's partly Homelander laying his shadow on the kid and on Becca, because Homelander grew up isolated and just doing these tests and everything, but at least he knew he had those powers. And he thinks that the one thing that the kid should be having, even if he's in this isolation like Homelander grew up in, is to be able to know that he has those powers. That thing that makes Homelander feel that he's superior to others. That thing that helps to soothe his soul when he's getting very upset. That knowledge that no matter what, he is a god and everyone else are ants. And he's been the only one of his kind for a long time. He knew that the other soups were made. They weren't born that way. And so he doesn't really look at them as his equals either. It really explains a lot of his attitude towards them. But here with Ryan, Ryan has been born. Ryan is of his blood, and he may only be of half his blood because, that's how reproduction works with humans. But he is still his son, and he expects him to be just as powerful, every bit as powerful as Homelander is. But Rebecca is very uncomfortable with him being there and tells him as much. And she's like, you need to leave. It's surprising given how she was when we last saw her in these flashbacks and stuff with Billy. But also she's had 9 years to really, go through therapy and do a lot of work on how she would possibly confront this person if she ever saw him again. Also, she's full mama bear mode. Her kid's life is at stake, and it sounds in their interaction like Homelander may have threatened the boy's life, because he tells her, hey, we have an agreement. I'm not going anywhere, because he's safe and he's still getting to be free. He's walking around. He's alive. So it's fine. So we see that perhaps he also doesn't hold his son's life in a high regard. I think he's mostly excited to play house and to not be the only one of his kind in his superiority at this point. He's projecting a lot onto the kid. He is laying his shadow on both Becca and Ryan, and it's not helpful for anyone involved. He's also setting himself up for disappointment by putting these huge, high expectations on the kid. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to catch up on the Deep and his therapy with Carol. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how Billy is desperately trying to find Rebecca based on the scant descriptive notes he was able to take regarding her surroundings before Homelander knocked him back out and dumped him at a Tony Cicero's parking lot in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we also talked about how Kimiko keeps writing boy without anyone getting it, and how Homelander's trying to force this relationship with his biological son, Ryan. In the meantime, the Deep is getting therapy with Carol. We see that a bit of time has passed because the Deep has filled out this questionnaire or survey that Carol has given him, including directions to draw a picture of himself and directions to, answer like what might be a Beck Depression Index, things like that. Also some free forms of like, how do you see yourself? How do you visualize yourself? What makes you special? And he's sitting there and she's reading through his survey and he goes, did I get them right? And she explains, that's not what it's about. There's no right or wrong answer. But she wants him to embrace his gills because he's had a lot of hang-ups about his body and his gills. And she noticed that he did not draw them on his drawing of his body. He's bare-chested, but he doesn't have the gills present there. So she wants him to open up more. But he's really reluctant to do it. So Eagle tells him that he's going to essentially give him a shroom tea. It seems to be shrooms, but it's definitely some kind of hallucinogenic. And he tells him, I'm not going on this trip with you. You go ahead and have this yourself. This will help open you up so that you can really do the work. And the Deep weirdly does the work. It's a very strange episode in that regard, but the Deep stuff gets super surreal. Out of all of their side quests and their side plots, I think that the Deeps is really the strangest one. It gives me some Who Framed Roger Rabbit kind of vibes too. It's absurdism and surrealism, and And, that's one of my favorite, or two of my favorite genres. I love absurdism. I love surrealism in comedy and literature, in art. So I really am enjoying this in the media of being film. So in this episode of The Deep Does Shrooms, we see him sitting in someone's bedroom, and he's listening to the Goo Goo Dolls and talking to his gills, which are voiced by Patton Oswalt. I recognized that voice immediately. It's not a breaking the fourth wall moment, but it is a Deadpool-type hilarity. I really thought it was pretty funny, but it also really weirded me out the first time. The second time I watched it, kind of funny, but also it made me feel sad. That's just how The Boys is, though. It's that tragicomedy, you guys. So he's listening to the Goo Goo Dolls, and then his gills start talking to him, and they have a painful heart-to-heart about his insecurities regarding his body and his gills. And then his gills start singing to him after the Deep apologizes to them as he touches his gills, and he's looking at a mirror while he does this. So his gills start singing, "You are so beautiful to me," as the Deep learns how to love himself, and his gills tell him that he's not ugly on the inside either, that he has been doing these terrible things to people out of a very deep-rooted insecurity in his gills, and being afraid that people was going to think that he was a freak. So he's essentially been hurting other people before he can hurt himself, or before they can hurt him, really. And that seems to be the direction they're going in with that he doesn't love his own body and he doesn't appreciate his body. And so that is what's causing him to lash out at other people's bodies and to try to take that control from them because he feels so out of control. Really, it sounds a lot like therapy, but I'm sure Carol is going to do something super crazy to make us very uncomfortable, and to also maybe do something extra crazy with the Deep. Eagle the Archer seems very nice, but he and Carol are that cult-like nice, where you are just slightly off-put and uneasy. It's a very similar feeling to when you see Uncanny Valley portrayals on television. That's the kind of same heebie-jeebies that it gives me. But Carol and Eagle lock the Deep in that room, despite him trying to break out at different points, or, bang on the door at least during different points, saying he wants out because he's upset about it. Now, I think the Deep is also supposed to be super strong, like most of the other soups, who seem to all have in common that they're super strong and that they are bulletproof and they have a quick healing factor. That seems to be the commonality for all of them. And Starlight that's kind of mentioned to her by Stormfront at one point too. She's like, "You're bulletproof, what are you afraid of?" So it would seem that he should be able to break out of there, but I guess we're just supposed to roll with it and be like, hey, he's on shrooms. He's just saying he wants out of there because he's upset, and he knows that he can't run from himself, which is really what Eagle and Carol are trying to get across. But they lock him in there for most of the episode until he sings "You Are So Beautiful to Me" in a duet with Patton Oswalt, his gills. And then I suppose they're going to let him out. We also get to catch up with Starlight in this episode, having to really be super vaughty. So she is recording the same intros over and over and over again for different national news stations regarding girl power in the Seven and the new girl, Stormfront. So they are deciding to take this on a Girls Get It Done tour. Ashley is super pumped about this. She's not having to work with Homelander, so he doesn't really care what she's doing, or at least not as much. And so she gets to do this awesome marketing ploy. And she's going to have Queen Maeve, Stormfront, and Starlight go around and do a press junket together. So they do a bunch of this stuff, and we get our first glimpse of Starlight warming up to Stormfront because she keeps being snarky, and that makes Starlight laugh. She's like, okay, maybe this girl's okay. Queen Maeve seems, of course, far more ambivalent, as she is wont to do, but also Starlight's introduction to Stormfront was a bit different from Homelander and Queen Maeve's, which was live streamed while they were actively trying to work, and she rolled up in there being chaotic and rude. So, I would imagine that they may feel differently about this for a while. Also, though, Maeve is not inclined to trust people. Even her relationship with Starlight is still one that's very much at arm's length. The only person that she tends to let in is her ex-girlfriend, Elena. And while they are in the middle of this press junket, Maeve gets a text and blows off the Girls Get It Done tour and tells Ashley, hey, I have a family emergency. At which point, Stormfront also tries to call out with a family emergency, also making Starlight laugh more. So you can see that she's really warming up to Stormfront. But Maeve leaves, and it turns out that she really was called on a family emergency because her ex-girlfriend Elena is in the hospital for having an attack of appendicitis. She had to have her appendix removed. So I guess she had this at work or something, or on her insurance, for her family to be contacted regarding if something happened to her. Maeve was still listed as her first contact. And we also get to see Maeve's real name, Maggie Shaw, as Maeve explains to Elena, who's waking up in the hospital, that she was called because she was, her emergency contact. It had never been updated after they broke up 2 years and some change ago. So Elena is not entirely glad to see her, but it's still a very nice gesture, and she came as Maggie Shaw. She didn't necessarily come as Maeve. She's not dressed like Maeve at all. She just looks like any other visitor in the hospital. We also get to catch up with Billy and see that the contact he was referring to is Grace Mallory, the lady who used to be their leader before her grandchildren were killed by Lamplighter prior to season 1 beginning. So Mallory had dropped out, and she told Billy she never wanted to see him again at the end of the last episode, and he told her he would never show up at her house again. But he didn't promise that he wouldn't show up at Susan Rayner's funeral. So Billy sent an edible arrangement to a funeral, because he's just classy like that. And Mallory sees it while she's at the funeral, then goes to get in her car in the parking deck and tells him to get out of the car. She's like, I taught you this one. I already know you're here, and I already saw your stupid edible arrangement. Super gave you away. So what do you want? She's very upset with him. He doesn't seem to care as much about Susan's death, really. And she accuses him of having killed Stillwell. She's like, hey, Susan's funeral right over there has 12 federal agents. I'm going to go turn you in right now for killing Madeline Stillwell, because that's not okay. She thinks that he has killed someone who was not necessarily supposed to be in the line of fire, and that was really collateral damage, like her grandkids. It's not that she really cares about Madeline Stillwell. It's that Madeline represents to her what her grandkids were. So instead of just being ambivalent about Billy's presence and being like, get out of my car, I'm leaving, she is straight up going to put in the effort to go and turn him in. But Billy says he didn't kill Madeline, he just blew up her body to defend himself, and that Homelander did it, and Billy thinks he can find out who killed Susan, or that he knows who killed Susan. He's like, we went to go talk to her, and they knew that she knew more than she was supposed to, and they literally blew her head up. So I need your help. And he tells Mallory that he wants her help doing something, and trying to find the killer for Susan. And she's like, you never cared about Susan, and I'm not doing this for you. So she calls him on this just being of interest to him because it aligns with his real agenda, and he doesn't disagree with her and tells her the truth off screen. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to catch up with Starlight and Stormfront on the press junket. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the Deep doing shrooms and Billy making a deal with Mallory to help him get some information and find Susan Rayner's killer. So, after this point, we have Starlight still on this super long press junket with Stormfront, something neither of them are jazzed about. Starlight has been doing this a lot longer than Stormfront, and she's just getting really irritated and fed up with it, whereas Stormfront looks a bit amused at the absurdism of having those same conversations repeatedly. Like, she also looks a bit fed up, but not in the same way that Starlight does. Starlight looks also resentful, but Stormfront is just like, wow, this is crap. This is really stupid, this thing that we're doing. And she refers to it as getting this stuff out of the way so we can go and do our real jobs. So you can tell that she cares more about fighting crime, which is also where Starlight stands on that spectrum. But while Starlight keeps playing the role that's been assigned to her, Stormfront is just going, hey, I'm just gonna break out of character on this. I'm gonna do something that everybody loves when it happens in real life. Well, not everyone, but it's really popular in the media. So you get a lot of these superhero press junkets in which female superheroes get asked about their workout routine and their underwear and their love life. The actresses who play them, that is. And their male counterparts don't tend to get these questions. They don't ask questions about how they're balancing their family and having their job. They only ask that to the women. So this is one of those moments that we've seen, like when Scarlett Johansson gave it to a reporter or an interviewer once for asking her about how she fits into her suit or something, or if she was able to wear underwear with it. I'm getting hers and Anne Hathaway's and like 6 others that I've watched all jumbled together. But it's a really smart PR move, and I haven't decided yet whether or not that's Stormfront's intention. Is this all just a PR upset? Is this her being real, or is she trying to convince Starlight that she is bold and anti-Vought so Starlight will trust her and tell her what's going on? Mr. Edgar is no dummy. And Mr. Edgar directly hired Stormfront. So she may well be a spy for him, just like Ashley is a spy for Homelander. But to get this across, when Stormfront is asked something about her gender or feminism and stuff, she says, D&B on television, and talks about how her outfit is anti-feminist because it doesn't have pockets. She's like, you want to talk about feminism? Let's talk about getting me some pockets over here. So she's irreverent and funny. She's like Jennifer Lawrence is in a lot of her interviews. So in this Stormfront character, while she's doing these interviews, I'm getting strength and sass and just a fed up with your crap type of attitude. There's this air that this is ridiculous and she's not going to put up with a lot of it anymore. But she also extends that to Starlight. So for me, I also feel, Jennifer Lawrence is one of the feels you're getting from this. Also Scarlett Johansson. Also a little bit of Anne Hathaway. Maybe even some Dakota Johnson. She's that willing to call them on their crap. I know Dakota Johnson isn't necessarily a superhero, but I very much enjoy her interviews and also her recent movie, The High Note, which isn't sci-fi, but if you're looking for something about music to watch, there you go. I will send you in that direction. This show's all about the music anyway. Or at least it's about Billy Joel. So Starlight is also surprised when A-Train comes out to greet her on air. They have been sitting here doing these things all day, and it's pretty much just been the same thing over and over and over again. But then she gets a question about A-Train, and they ask how she feels about him having been injured and stuff, and she's acting very sympathetic about it, and then they surprise her and go, how would you feel if we brought your old coworker out here right now? And he runs out there super fine. You'd have no idea that anything had been wrong with him before, and he's very much in good health and on his own 2 feet. And she knows that that also means that she's in deep crap. So after they see each other on air, and she has to keep that straight face, she also speaks with him at a Vought meet and greet, another one of those events they hold in that same building. I think it's really interesting to see these 2 surprises back to back, and I wonder who orchestrated this. I want to think that it was perhaps Mr. Edgar. I don't see a reason why Ashley would really want to surprise Starlight with A-Train, but who knows? So, in this situation, Homelander shouldn't, and I don't think he does, know yet that Annie let Huey go. That she gave A-Train the, CPR and stuff after his heart failed him because he was on Compound V, while she let Huey go at the same time. And, if he knew, he probably would have killed her already. So the only person I can see this coming from really is Mr. Edgar, or A-Train just not giving anybody else a heads up and going, hey, it'd be fun now that I'm awake, let's go and surprise them. It'll be a great PR piece. And Ashley being like, yes, that would be great. Because also somehow magically, no one else has mentioned anywhere that one of the 7 who was in a coma has woken up. Somehow that's not come up at all throughout the day. So either this was fully unintentional and it's just something that happened where they're like, oh yeah, that would be a great idea. Or this was something orchestrated by A-Train or orchestrated by Mr. Edgar. But I don't think that A-Train told Mr. Edgar either. I'm just saying that Mr. Edgar may be very perceptive and can be getting their reactions live via Stormfront going and live streaming them while she's meeting Homelander and Queen Maeve, or A-Train popping up on Starlight and just seeing how they all react to different surprises. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just being a conspiracy theorist. At the Vought meet and greet though, A-Train talks to Starlight and reveals that he knows that she let Huey go and threatens her with that info. But he won't say whom he told. He's just like, hey, did you tell Homelander that you let Huey get away while all that was going on? And it didn't go very well. He gets very upset with her about all of this, but he was already angry to begin with. He was seething. He was just waiting to release it. It's a pressure valve at this point. She initially tries to put across that it's really lucky that he called her in for backup beforehand since his heart gave out, to suss out whether he was actively aware of the fact that she let Huey go, or if maybe he'd forgotten something in his coma or in his heart attack. But he calls her bluff and jumps to her real quick to correct her, and then just walks off, letting her just stew in it and let her wait for the other shoe to drop. It's very calculated and it's very grim, but that's also who A-Train is. Huey is watching more Billy Joel videos, by the way. That has nothing to do, really, with the story as far as I can tell, but I'm a huge Billy Joel fan, so I enjoy it, and Huey enjoys it. I think that he's really stressed, and this is the only thing bringing him much solace now. Butcher and Huey and the rest of the boys are down in the bunker again now, and Butcher walks in saying that Mallory told him that if they help find the soup terrorist and they bring the soup terrorist in, then she'll get the CIA to effectively scrub their records / pardon them by dropping the case. Like, it'll never go to trial. They'll just drop all of the stuff against them. So Huey's suspicious about this, but Butcher comes in with more info than he had before he left, which is an address that he says he got from Mallory that's associated with the ship that brought in that soup terrorist to the U.S. So the guys decide to go with him because this is their opportunity to be free from hiding and having to live in this gross bunker, and to be reunited with their families again, which is MM's primary motivator. I imagine Huey may also want to go back and see his dad, or at the very least, not live in a bunker anymore, although Frenchie, of course, has no need to go back to his family, at least not his father, who was very abusive. I'm not sure if he would bother to go back to his mother and see her by the time we get to this far into his life, really. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to catch up with Queen Maeve and Elena in the hospital. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blanks and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were catching up with A-Train and Starlight as we find out that A-Train does remember everything that happened before, and he's definitely planning to use that against Starlight. He's not just coldly manipulating her and blackmailing her, but rather he's angry at her, and she has a very real reason to fear that she might die because he very well may tell Homelander. However, Maeve is still missing out on all of this because she's with Elena in the hospital. And they're chilling there watching the TV show Botch together when Elena says that she'll let Maeve take her to dinner, only to get upset when Maeve kind of freezes a little bit because this is really what she wants, but she's not able to go out in public with her. And that makes Elena feel like she did before when they were together, that Maeve was trying to hide her from the world. She was trying to keep her a secret, like she was ashamed of her or something. And she tells her to forget it. And she's like, you know what, just leave. I forgot, we have to stay in. Just leave. You can tell this was a huge source of contention in their relationship. But Maeve can't keep it to herself anymore. She's tired of Elena hating her because she loves this person so much. And Maeve comes clean about Homelander being crazy and her fear that he'll hurt Elena. She tells him about how one time a guy flirted with her at the Oscars all night or some award show, and afterwards Homelander killed him. They found his head in one room and his body in the other, and the guy's house had just caught fire. But Homelander had clearly lasered the guy. So she's terrified that he's going to hurt her. And she also says that Elena wouldn't believe the things that Homelander has made her do too. And at first I thought maybe she was just really referencing the train, but now I'm starting to think that she may be worried that Elena may be harmed by Maeve by being forced by Homelander. So that's interesting, and I am hoping we delve into that as we go along too. Not that I want Maeve to hurt Elena or anything like that, but I just looked at it a different way on my second watch through. And that gave me the perspective that Homelander might be even more demented than we already thought he was. I mean, we know that he forced A-Train to kill his girlfriend Popclaw in season 1, but we don't know exactly what all went on with him and Maeve. He's never even been in a sexual relationship with A-Train, but he used to date Maeve, so it seems extra grim in retrospect. I am so glad, though, that Maeve finally told Elena, that she finally told someone outside of the Seven that Homelander is a monster. She can't really trust any of her coworkers, and that includes Starlight. She doesn't know her well enough. She knows that it's dangerous to show affection for people. She does stand up for Starlight and keeps Homelander from lasering her when he finds out she was with Huey, but still, that's protecting her. That doesn't necessarily mean that Maeve is willing to share her own secrets. She couldn't tell Starlight about Elena either. That would be too much to put her at risk. And that's fair. I get where she's coming from with that. Even if she thinks that Annie is legitimately a good person, that's perhaps even more reason to not tell her. So while this is happening, we also get to see Homelander trying to establish a father-son relationship with Ryan, but he's doing it very poorly. He's trying to tuck the kid into bed, and he barely knows him. He just bought him a cell phone. The kid's like 9 years old, and he's homeschooled. He doesn't even need it for school. He doesn't get to hang out with a lot of other kids. He doesn't go anywhere that his mom doesn't drop him off with someone she trusts, like the piano lessons. So he's very confused, and the kid's like, thanks, this is really exciting, but who am I going to call? And Homelander tells him, oh, you can call me. Trying to really skip all the steps and force that father-son relationship in there. He even goes so far as to tell Ryan that they are both gods and that they can do anything they want. And Ryan seems really uncomfortable with this and doesn't know how to get out of it, so he does what a lot of kids in abusive situations do, and he offers a redirection. So he just tells Homelander, hey, I really should probably be getting to sleep right now. And Homelander's like, oh, okay. And he just lets go of the fact that the kid didn't respond to anything that he said. And on his way out of the room, though, Homelander turns to the kid and says, I love you, son. And then just stares at the kid for a minute, and Ryan doesn't say anything. And so Homelander goes, you're supposed to say it back. And so the kid goes ahead and does, because he's being coerced to. Ryan's uncomfortable with Homelander. He doesn't necessarily know what exactly is off, but his gut is telling him that something is wrong in this scenario. He's uncomfortable with it, but he also realizes that it would be in his best interest to reply with, I love you, when Homelander says, I love you. So he's still definitely scared of him, but he has good gut instincts from what I can tell in regards to survivability. I'm not saying that his options are great, or that there's a right or wrong response for Ryan in this situation. In this episode, we also see that Becca drops Ryan off at his piano lessons and says she's going to meet some lady friend, and then drives off to this military gated-looking facility and demands to speak to somebody called Dr. Park. She is hysterically angry. She's not quite, like, laughing angry or anything like that, but she's, like, angry tears, angry, and is threatening to take Ryan and just disappear and everything. She's like, you promised me we would never have to see him again? This is not okay. And I'll disappear with my kid if I have to. You'll never find us. And Dr. Park tells her over the phone, because he won't let her into the facility, that that's unfortunate for her. But now that Homelander knows, there's no unringing that bell, and that he wasn't happy to begin with when he found out that they had been hiding Ryan from him, and that Becca was still alive out there raising the spawn of Homelander after he had raped her. So they're not going to be able to do anything really to protect her, because they're also just as afraid of him. These people are likely part of the group that runs the Seven, Vought, but as a hyper-capitalist group, Vought is mostly concerned with making money, not about making good superheroes. And that's part of the theme of this season, is the difference between good and nice. That one is one that stuck with me really quickly. As soon as she mentioned it, as soon as Stormfront mentioned it, I latched onto that one, because that's one of my favorite philosophical discussions too. Like, there is a difference between nice and kind and good, and people often conflate the three. I'm not going to quite get into that one today because we're about out of time, but we are going to talk about that in the next episode or two. But the point of this is that she talks to Dr. Park, and he's like, hey, just go along with it. We're hoping he'll get bored, just keep him happy, and he'll probably run off. And while she's standing there talking on the phone to Dr. Park at the guard post, she sees that the guard is also watching footage of Homelander in her home as he's walking around and smelling the clothes in her drawers, finding a false-bottomed one that has a picture of her with Billy in it, an old Polaroid. And doesn't seem very happy at that, but not necessarily jealous. I do think that he wants to step in and just have a family, though. His son is the most important component, but I think that part of him also wants Becca. He wants that life that he's seen on TV, the ones that Vought made him make up and tell people that he had after they raised him in a padded cell, essentially, by himself, testing him on all of these different materials to see what the true limit of his powers were, and to synthesize the compound V. And he looks directly at one of the cameras in the room that he's in her house as she's on the phone with Dr. Park. And so Dr. Park tells her, you'd probably better get on moving because you probably had to drive like crazy to get here, and Ryan's piano lesson is almost over. Clearly, they're monitoring every part of her house all the time. It's alarming to see Homelander in there looking at her, but they aren't monitoring Homelander. They are specifically monitoring her. There are cameras in like every room of her house that guard sits there and watches. And so she leaves to get her kid because she has to. But that night, after Homelander leaves Ryan's room, she runs into him in the hallway and tells him again that he needs to get out of her house. She's like, this is not what I signed up for. You cannot be here. And he tells her, you're just going to have to deal with it. By the way, Dr. Park was right. I'm not going to get bored with this. And that's when she realizes that he heard absolutely everything. So I imagine that he somehow heard it. I'm not quite sure because of how far away she was. I don't know exactly what his radius is for how far away he can hear, or even how far away she was. I don't think that Dr. Park told him because he knew verbatim what Dr. Park said, and I doubt Dr. Park would say that knowing that Homelander was going to hear it, because he's also afraid of him like everyone else is. So I'm going to go with Homelander somehow just overheard her. I don't know how. but we're going to go with that because it seems he could hear it even when she was talking to Dr. Park on the phone as well, being that far away. Then he lets her know that he's not going anywhere at all and heads down the stairs, that he's planning to make himself at home. And he asks her if she wants Jiffy Pop as both a threat and a notification that he's there to stay. He's not going anywhere and he's going to be part of this family. But it doesn't necessarily tell you in what capacity. But he's been in there frowning at her picture of Billy and smelling her clothes and doing weird things to her milk carton, drinking it directly from the source in a way that truly only Anthony Starr can really capture. It is unsettling and a little off-putting, but not as much so as the baby bottle from the first episode. It's definitely still outlining that he continues to have this mommy kink, though. Things look a little bleak right now for Rebecca and Ryan. We're going to cut this episode in half right here, and next time we will be talking more about concepts of nice versus good, how all the world's a stage, and the concept of joining someone on the dark side in this season. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.